Good evening, everybody. Hope you're all doing well. It is July 1st, 2026. And as you can see, I have one of our regular guests, Stephanie Joy, is here. We sort of decided kind of last minute, and I appreciate Stephanie does her own live stream at noon on Wednesdays. So she's doing a lot of live
One
streaming.
o'clock,
Oh, 1 o'clock. I'm sorry, 1 o'clock.
1 p.m. Eastern. Yeah.
1 p.m. Eastern. Okay, I stand corrected. So I appreciate you. I hope your voice holds out. Um, so we're just going to, do what we normally do and just kind of answer some questions. Actually, there are a couple of things I wanted to ask you. I didn't ask you before because I want it to be kind of a little more
Sure.
spontaneous. These are questions that I get, and I don't really have great answers to. I'm curious what yours would be. The first is I get sometimes emails or calls from people who say, I was awarded disability benefits, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, and I never got any money. What do I do? And, my answer generally is contact your congressperson. I don't think there's anything I can really do about that. What would you say to somebody? And I would say, just as an aside, I suspect that there's more to the story than I got awarded, I'm not getting my money. But what do you say to people with that type of situation?
Right. I have heard it in the distant past, but not in a long time. I, I I think when I did hear it though, I'd be like, so what happened? I would flesh it out. Um, but yeah, I mean, if you don't have time to do that, obviously, because that would take a whole 2 hour conversation probably with them anyway, and they may not know the answer
Right.
because 10 years has gone by. So yeah, I mean, I'm not going to start saying, well, did you have child support? Like, all the things
Yeah.
that could have offset. I'm not going there. Or are you a fleeing felon? Like,
Yeah. Right.
fugitive? And
Yeah, like I
so,
said, there's always another side to the story. My point though is that as
yeah,
private attorneys, it's hard to kind of get this point across sometimes. We get paid a percentage of past due benefits when we win disability for somebody. If somebody was to hire me, and I wouldn't even know what to do, but let's say somebody was to say, okay, I want you to look into this for me. I'll pay you hourly. You still have to file a fee petition. You still have to get approved for any fee you would charge. And who knows how much it would cost. I mean, trying to get to the bottom of that. I mean, I did one time situation like that where I tried to, figure out something that had happened a long time ago. And wow. So,
keep going. I can hear
yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah. That's her dog, not my dog. But
That's one of many.
one of many. Okay, but the point is that I literally had to go to the Social Security office. This is years ago, and I sat there in the waiting room, and I got and talked to somebody. They pulled it up. They didn't know what to do. I mean, this is just unfortunately not something that a private lawyer can really do much with. So my answer is, here's a senator in your state. Contact your senator. They have a Social Security person. They can ask questions and get answers. And that's really the best answer I can give. I don't know what else to do, but I mean, but like you said, there's always another side to it. Was there child support? Was there some sort of a hold on it? Was there more
Something.
offset? Who knows?
I wonder too, if, and maybe they can go send like an SSA 3288 to the field office and get a copy of that entire file.
Yep.
And then at least that's a starting point too, as well as definitely hitting up the whether it's a senator or the House of Representatives person for
Right.
their
Right.
district.
Or maybe even a Freedom of Information Act. I mean, there's ways to get creative, but realize that these type of things, if you're hiring an attorney, to do this, I mean, you're going to be, the hourly rate's going to be $250, $300 an hour. And most attorneys, and again, I don't do this kind of work. I'm just telling you that if you hired an attorney to kind of investigate something from 10 years ago, you could be looking at that $10,000, $15,000.
Easy,
Anywhere.
easy.
It's just unfortunately the law game is not cheap. And again, this is sort of a different issue, but contingency fee allows people like us to represent folks without any money up front. One point I always try to make to my clients: contingency does not mean free. It means we're deferring, we're taking some risk, we're deferring getting paid, but it's not free. And that's why you can't take every case that comes to the door, because some cases you may believe the person, but they're not winnable. because there's just not going to be enough evidence there. The person's too young, or it's one of these cases where you have it's
Yep.
not going to work. So, but yeah,
It's a
so
low percentage. Yeah.
yeah, so I think that again, benefits awarded a long time ago. My answer is contact your elected representative. I typically recommend the senator's office because senators are in office for 6 years. Their staff tends to be a little more permanent, and they have more staff as opposed to representatives. But if you know a representative, that's fine too. All right, second question. I'm sure you get this periodically. Somebody says, I went to an ALJ hearing. I was denied, did not appeal. I want to refile. Um, what do you tell them? And I'll tell you what I say is, if it's only been 30 or 50, 60 days, first of all, if you're within the time to appeal it, you should really look at that and have somebody really look at possibly appealing it. But realize that if you file a new case after a denial at a hearing, the earliest onset date you have is going to be the day after the unfavorable decision. And anything that happened before that, yes, it's relevant, it's background, but they're not going to relitigate that. So you really have to show something new, that something has changed. So many times, I think your case might be stronger if there's no date less insured problem, wait 6 months or a year if there's a new medical issue that's popped up, or big one is if your age category changes, you go from 49 to 50 or 54 to 55, that may be a better argument. What do you tell somebody who says, I just got a denial, 3 months ago, I want to refile?
Yeah, I agree with you entirely. Do we hear an echo by chance?
I don't hear any echo. I hear you fine.
Okay, good.
Maybe if anybody hears an echo for either one of us, please let us know. But I don't hear any echoes. Okay. So
all right.
Yeah.
Now I don't hear it. Okay. Yeah, I would say the same thing. And I sometimes try to explain too, like, so let's say you start really going to town on certain things that might have been, you didn't really get the strong enough evidence for.
Right.
And at the same time, it's a time to also see if there was something lacking. And was there any evidence that judge didn't see? That could be something that could, even though it happened before, mm-hmm. and you're not going to be able to overturn what the judge did, but it might give them good reason to find you disabled now because they have different evidence that the judge didn't have. And I also say, so let's say you wait the 6 months or whatever, we could still assert that date. You didn't actually lose any, what would be back benefits if you win it. It just gives you a better chance of having some more meat for initial, yep. If they file right away, like you said, because they're going to give deference to the judge's, and I think this is what you were saying, right? The judge's decision and all that he had. And now you come back and say, okay, I want to file again. I still got the same stuff, period. They're gonna, in their head, of course, be like, he already saw that stuff,
right?
And the new stuff is exactly the same. So, we're not going to, we have no reason to find something different than the judge found who actually saw you in person or spoke to you on the phone at the hearing.
The other thing I would tell people is, maybe try to work. I think if you try to work and you're not successful, that's evidence. Maybe you can get a statement from a third party, a former or a coworker or supervisor or somebody to say that you tried to work, you had these problems, you couldn't do it. Or again, if there's a new medical issue or your age category changed, you have to show something different. The point is when I hear people, and again, if somebody comes to me and they've applied and they get denied, they applied and they get, and it go, on and on and on. They've had 2 hearings. You're starting to look at that going, judges looking at this, judges value their time. And if there've been 2 previous hearings, for example, and you've been denied, there's nothing substantially different, you're probably not going to win, especially if it's the same judge. Many times it will be. So I think you just, again, from the perspective of the attorney, we're only getting paid if we do win. And so you're looking at, okay, what has changed? Why is this case different? And I've taken these cases. I will take them if I think there's something different. But, it is kind of a little bit of a red flag to look at it. And I'll give you another red flag. And I'm sure, Steph, you see the same thing. When somebody comes and says, my lawyer was terrible in my previous case, he didn't know what he was doing. That is not a good thing to do, in my opinion, because again, and maybe the lawyer was terrible, but maybe the evidence wasn't good. And, one of the things you learn in law school is if somebody comes to you for a new case and they're complaining about their former attorney, that's a red flag because they're going to complain about you. Just because you get a bad result doesn't mean your attorney did a bad job. Maybe the evidence wasn't very good. So again, you have to think about that.
Yep. Yep.
Instead of saying my attorney was bad, maybe the case wasn't that good.
Or if they ditch their attorney midway along, and I've taken those, but it's like, sometimes they had unrealistic expectations.
Yep.
So then I know, like, well, if I'm going to take, because let's say I think they do have a good case, and I'm like, you don't know what your attorney was doing behind the scenes because it's not something you're going to be privy to. They don't have
Yep.
time to be holding you by the hand while they do it. So, I always try to explain, like, sometimes when I just talk to people about really think hard if you want to change lawyers, because there's going to be fee splits. The contingent fee agreements are not going to apply for either one. That attorney has every right to ask for a fee for what he or she did.
Yep.
And now they don't have the protective cap of 9,200 either once we go to fee petition. So
but
they
we
can get
also,
much bigger bills.
we have to file a fee petition, which is a pain in the rear end because it takes forever. So yeah, I mean,
it is a pain.
Yeah, you got to really, really think about that. All right, last hypothetical, if you want to call it that, then we'll get to the questions. Have you had clients come to you that send you an AI-generated analysis of their case? They went to ChatGPT, they went to Claude, Perplexity, whatever the engine is. What do you say when people do that? And by the way, I don't blame somebody for doing it.
Right. No, me too. And honestly, I think if they put their records in and get a good summary from AI, I think it's good for the person to understand their medical records. I do it with my own sometimes, and it's a big test. I'm like, hey, can you just tell me? But yeah, like I always say to them, I go, well, that's fine. You can read that. I go, we're not using that, and sometimes they want to draft like a letter to their doctor. They're like, well, I want to ask him for an RFC or something like that, which I'm always like, no, you're not doing that if I'm involved. And they have a whole AI generated letter, or they want to message them about certain things. And the AI might say something like, dear doctor, and it'll say, please document well for me, this, and this, and this, and you should be putting this in your notes. And they're like telling their doctor. I think the doctor is going to get very annoyed. But aside from the fact that I'm like, we can't use your AI synopsis of your case. We just can't use it because,
And I will tell you, and we happen to both be in an AI mastermind group. Steph and I are in the same group, and we talk literally once or twice a week about AI tools. And the one commonality you see over and over, AI is not, I mean, it does some great things, but it's also, you can get garbage from it. I mean, it can make mistakes. It can tell you something. It wants to please, and it will tell you
hallucinations
and how brilliant you are. What a great question. I mean, I've had situations where, I'll be talking about that with the AI about a particular issue, and it misses something completely. And then I say, well, you missed this. Oh, you're so right. Thank you for bringing it to my attention.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, but that's not the point here. So, I've had people send me AI generated information, and I think it's great to learn, if you want to use AI to learn more about your case and to have a Social Security kind of analysis, but beware that it's not always accurate, and it may not reflect current Social Security law either. And the other thing you got to be really careful about is if you have a free plan, nothing is private. So if you upload your medical records to a free version of ChatGPT, I don't think that there's anybody really looking for it, but it becomes part of the sort of this public, training kind of thing. So you got to be really, really careful about that. I mean, the AI tools, and we were just talking before we went on about how to preserve privacy, and it's a challenge. You got to really be really careful not to release, confidential information. But it's a great tool, and I don't have problems people using it, but just realize that, you have to be very, very skeptical just because it says it's just like, because it's on the internet doesn't make it true. Same thing, just because the AI says doesn't make it true. So anyway, go ahead, you're saying.
I was going to say, and it just gets all of its information from all the other articles and things and, statutory stuff, the whole mix.
Yep.
From the internet itself. So it's got its biases and whatever it reads the most of, it kind of drives towards that, even though that could be completely wrong.
Yep.
So,
And sometimes, like for example, I use Claude, paid the Teams version of Claude without training on it, to preserve privacy. But, if you don't tell Claude to read through every page of the record, it will kind of read the first 10 or 15 pages and sort of assume, you don't want that. So again, you have to, it's like a tool, you got to work with it. You got to keep talking to it to eventually get it to do what you want it to do. So
you have to train it.
you have to train it, right? It's like a very smart, eager, law clerk that doesn't have any experience, and it may sound like it knows what it's talking about, but it many times does not. All right, Hakasad has a question here. It's a multi-part question. Happy 250th, happy 4th of July, absolutely. And I agree, it is a privilege to live in this country. I think, with all the political division, people forget how fortunate we are. I mean, I don't know if you traveled much overseas, but you go elsewhere, and you don't get. I mean, it sounds silly. You go to the restaurant, you may pay for water. You don't get refills on anything. You don't get ice in anything. It's just a different mentality. Gas is 3 times as expensive. We have it pretty good here. We really do. But I agree on that. Okay. He was watching a vlog. It says the claimant had 1,000 pages of medical records, but still lost because there was no direct mention in the medical record as to how these ailments directly affected functional capacity. Isn't this not 100% accurate? Because the rest of the records are, let's see here, completely unrelated to alleged impairment, a well laid out brief that synthesized the records and ailments mapped into functional limitations because some ailments inherently correlate to functional limitations, and could a brief doctors refrain from making this kind of diagnosis. So I think again, what's your opinion? I mean, big picture, what Haka said, I think it's a he, I don't know, is asking is, you have a record with a lot of medical records, but no doctor has completed a functional capacity evaluation. No doctor has addressed specifically how long you can sit or stand, how much you can lift. And what do you do about that? So I'll toss it to you. What do you do in that situation?
I find that to be the norm, actually. Most doctors won't even do an RFC, and I do think they're, by and large, I'm going to get some hate mail from this, but I think they're terrible. As a general rule, they're very poor recorders of things that are relevant to their patient's functionality. They just don't put that in there. They don't take the time. But I mean, I think he's saying that he or whoever got a denial and the judge in the denial said, because it does not say in the records how long you can sit.
Mm-hmm. That would
be unusual, I think, because the judges know that you infer, kind of. Mm-hmm. If the person is in a wheelchair, for instance, it might not say he can't walk, but if he's, so I mean, that's an obvious, example. But so I find that to be typical, and it's our job, we do a brief to discuss this kind of symptom would be affecting this kind of work-related task, and connecting the dots and all that. So I don't know. What was the end question?
Basically, what do? You have a situation where there's no discussion of functional issues in the medical record. The judge turned it down. I would say I would agree with what you said, that you have to make that argument. Couple of points. Number one, your testimony is evidence. So one of the things that you want to do as an attorney is you want to ask specifically about those things. How long can you sit? How long can you stand? That you're putting at least into evidence. Judge doesn't have to believe you, but at least, just like a judge doesn't have to believe your doctor saying you can only stand for 10 minutes, doesn't have to believe you, but at least it's there. And you're saying, and the argument that we make is the MRI shows a herniated disc with spinal cord impingement at L4-5. The claimant is testifying he can only stand for 10 to 15 minutes. That's consistent. So I agree. Most doctors aren't going to do that. Many times, I'm sure you see this too, doctors will, do a history at the beginning of the relationship, and they don't ever change it. And 3 or 4 years go by, and you get the same history as when the person came in when they were working and in a completely different scenario. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think you have to draw inferences. You've got to, ask, right, take testimony there. I think as a patient, you need to let the doctor know. That may mean sending the doctor a letter saying, these are the functional issues I'm dealing with. That becomes part of the record, and then discuss it with him or her, and say, hey, is this consistent? Is this something, what you're seeing here? What can we do about it? Show that you're engaged in wanting to make it better. I think that could help you a little bit. And of course, the wild card here is you may just have a judge who doesn't want to approve. I mean, there are, if you look at the approval rates, and there are websites out there you can do this, there are judges who approve 20%, 25%. They're just not going to approve if they don't see, if you're not 57 years old with 3 herniated discs, they're just not going to approve it. And it's nothing to do with the evidence, just you have a judge who just has a very, very conservative approach towards, or limited approach towards approving. But yeah, I think that, like you said, it's not common that you see FCEs. Sometimes you do. But even if you have them, judges don't have to accept it, right? They can say this is, not consistent with the rest of the record. But I just think that you have to just build around it. And, that's what an attorney can do, is sort of, okay, we got to prove this. How do we prove it? Statement, testimony, non-medical statements from other people, former coworkers, supervisors, even relatives or friends, making inferences from the evidence. I mean, that's how you do it. That's my take.
Yeah, and the judge did give him an RFC. It just wasn't one that legally meant disabled from all 12,000 jobs, but it limited him from some jobs. I'm sure.
Right.
I'm assuming, Hakasad, that the judge didn't say he has 0 functional limitations, and then give you, that means you can do everything constantly, including probably lifting 100 pounds. So he had to give you some sort of RFC. I don't know if you saw this, Jonathan, but Hakasad also asked a question at the end. How important is it to know the RFC in a case in order to vigorously represent your clients? Does a claimant have a right to know the RFC pre-hearing? But the RFC is what the judge.
Right. It's a legal determination.
A finding. So the judge doesn't know it until after the hearing. Yes, there was the adjudicators. Well, actually, the medical expert that they use, right? And they determined one on initial, which is why you were denied, and one on recon, which is why you were denied. And that would be in your DDE, and I would assume that your lawyer would let you have that if he has access to it.
Yeah. Just to explain the terms, RFC stands for residual functional capacity. That is a legal, not a medical. It's a legal determination as to what your capacity is after you factor in your medical problems. The residual, that's what residual means. Your functional capacity that is left over after we factor in medical issues. That's a legal determination by a judge. Now, we may have, as your attorney, we may have our own vision of what that RFC should be. The judge is going to have a different one. And the hypothetical questions that the judge asks in the hearing are, in effect, variations of that RFC. And the judge will choose one of those hypotheticals to reach the conclusion as to what he or she believes your RFC to be. And when Steph is talking about the DDE, Section A of the exhibit file contains the findings of the state agency at initial and at recon. And at the initial, the adjudicator will come up with an RFC and deny it because it's not work preclusive. At recon, they may come up with an RFC. It may be the same one, or it may be a little different, sometimes more restrictive, sometimes less restrictive. And, you can look at that. And when I'm doing a brief, I'm sure you do the same thing, I look at what the state agency did and say, well, they've already found this. Again, the judge is not bound by it, but you can say, look, Social Security's already found this. Let's make this our starting point. I mean, again, you can't assume it's going to happen, but usually judges are open to it. The other thing, why it's really important to look at the state agency work is they may have denied you on basis you can return to past work. Well, 2 years ago, that look back, which is 5 years, you might have had past work in the 5-year period. Now, a year and a half later, at the time of the hearing, the 5-year look back, there's no past relevant work. So they denied you at step 4 of the sequential process, saying you could return to past work. Now there is no past work. So, there's a lot of things you can mine from that, disability adjudicator's findings that, to make your case that much stronger. But yes, you absolutely want to look at that to see. But to answer your question, there is no quote RFC out there. It's what somebody decides an RFC is, judge wise.
Right. And we know which one we want to prove that you meet.
Right.
So the RFC that would get you to win.
Yeah.
So that's when
right.
we nag you about getting certain treatment, it's because it'll help you get to the RFC you need to prove.
And if you look at your lawyer's brief, you will see typically it's going to be, there's this 5-step sequential process. Step 1 is, are you working? Step 2 is, you have a severe impairment, which basically means there's a diagnosed problem that has some impact on your work capacity. Step 3, do you meet a listing? Step 4, can you return to past work? Step 5, can you do anything at all? And typically in the Step 5 section of the brief, you will see your lawyer has set out what he or she believes your RFC to be, and you're asking the judge to adopt that. If the judge does, that's a pretty good sign. But you have to know where you're trying to go. I mean, it's like, you're not going to get very far if you decide to go someplace and you don't know the destination, the address of where you're going. Same thing with this. You need to know what you're trying to prove. You need to show this is the RFC we want the judge to arrive at to win your case. So that's really what between you and your attorney to figure out what you need and what the evidence will support. And when it's supported.
Weave the needle.
Yeah.
We say weave the needle to that winning point right there. Yep. Not over here. That's not going to win for you. This is going to win for you.
And that's why, when we're doing pre-hearing calls, people sometimes get off on a tangent. They'll talk about something that happened 7 or 8 years ago when they were working. And from the Social Security standpoint, if you were able to work through it, it wasn't disabling. So the fact that you had a diagnosis of hypertension, 8 years ago, unless it's gotten a lot worse and it's a reason why you stopped working, it's probably not all that relevant. So again, part of what our job is to do is to keep you, like you said, thread that needle, focus on those things that are very specific to why you would not be able to work now. The other thing that a lawyer will do for you is tell you when there's some situations you may have to back off a little bit. Maybe the best thing to do is to change your onset date to your 50th birthday, your 55th birthday. Maybe it's to change it to a date, a year and a half after your original onset date, because the medical's better. That's sort of what you got to look at is what can we prove, and what is the best argument we have to prove? Because I've had situations where clients says I became disabled 2020, and it's 2026 now, and they can't get paid anyway because you only get paid 1 year prior to your date of application. I may say, let's change that onset date. As long as we're within the date last insured, let's change the onset date to make the judge's life easy. I mean, you want to really, do all that because judges, they take their job seriously. They're trying to protect the trust fund, and they're just not going to, give you just because you want it doesn't mean you're going to get it. People sometimes say, I paid into the system. I want my money out. They don't see it that way, right? They see it as their money. They're going to fight you every step of the way. So you got to know, when to hold them and when to fold them, as it were. Okay. All right. He said, I think it's reversible errors. Step 4. Again, and I don't want to get too much in the weeds here. Burden of proof, BOP stands for burden of proof. And he's saying, that if there's a reversible error, how judges conduct hearings, it may be. And again, I've seen situations where I'll give an example of a reversible error that I got a remand on, got a hearing coming up tomorrow on, where the judge basically said, I'm finding that the person is limited to occasional handling and fingering. That's a finding in the decision. And then later on, the hypothetical says frequent handling and fingering. That's reversible error because the judge made a finding and it's occasional, but the hypothetical said frequent. That doesn't make sense. And that could make a difference as far as whether the jobs that exist. So, when you look at errors, you got to look to see, are they significant errors? Are they things that would make a difference? Are they harmless errors too? But, the judge, if a judge, crosses his T's and dots his I's and makes a decision that's not in your favor, doesn't mean it's appealable. It might be, but, you got to find reversible error there someplace. Okay. But, to answer your question here, does the judge, come up with these hypos? Yeah. And again, the hypo will reflect his or her understanding of what your RFC is. And it'll contain most of the things that would be work, relevant. Is it going to contain everything that's gone on with you? Maybe not, but some of those things may not be particularly relevant to your case, and the judge, that may not be reversible error. Okay. Tribal Chief Bulldog Johnny. That's a lot of words there. Sorry, I've been on in a while. We'll let you go this time, not next time, though. Quick question. I've done a sleep study and found that I have sleep apnea. What kind of sleep apnea is required for disability? I'm thinking about applying. All right. What's your take on sleep apnea? I'll give you mine, but you go ahead and tell me what you think.
I would say it's really one of those more, generally, in my opinion, it's a peripheral thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not your main thing. It's not going to do your exertional for you. It's not going to get your RFC of down to sedentary or light. It's something we always mention because it might add to distractibility during the day. If we're trying to prove they can't do their prior skilled job, they've already been complaining about poor sleep. They have sleep apnea, limited hours, whatever. I don't find it to be the thing that's going to.
Yep, I totally agree.
That's not going to be any. Yeah,
I totally agree. I think sleep apnea is one of these things that what it will do is it can, show that you may have to take naps during the day. It may interfere with focus and concentration, so it may eliminate skilled, possibly semi-skilled jobs, may limit you to unskilled jobs. But sleep apnea alone, I don't think I've ever won a case on sleep apnea alone. I did have a case with cataplexy, which is kind of not narcolepsy is where you sort of fall asleep, kind of out of the blue. Cataplexy is not only you falling asleep, but your body kind of is in almost like a seizure situation where, you're aware what's going on, but your body's asleep, but your mind is not. And so you're sort of there trapped in your body. It's a kind of an unusual condition.
Yeah.
One of those. But that's the level of impairment you got to have, in my opinion, for a sleep problem. I'm not even sure if that's even considered a sleep problem, but sleep apnea alone, it can add to things. It can make, it can, again, maybe take you out of skilled work, but it's going to add to stuff, but it's not going to be the sole thing, in my opinion.
Yeah. I agree. And I think also, I think it's true when you have like really poor sleep and you total 3 hours a night, you are going to need naps during the day, but I find that they just don't acknowledge any of that. They're going to find it as you're taking it because you can, but if you're on the job, you wouldn't be. And that might not be true, but it's the kind of thing that it's next to impossible to get objective medical proof of that. I mean, you can complain to your doctors that you have to take 5 naps. I just find the SSA likes to, it's kind of like sometimes headaches and
migraine, right? I was thinking the same thing, migraine, headaches.
Yeah, they try to blow it all, like just they don't acknowledge it. Kind of like fibromyalgia pain.
Yeah, they assume that your level of headaches. Now, again, you can win a migraine case if you show you've taken 5 or 6 different medications. You're seeing a neurologist or a headache specialist, and they're basically talking about intractable headaches. Yeah, I mean, those cases will get approved because I think as somebody with migraine disorder. I mean, I've known a few people that have had migraines. I remember the first time I even heard about it. There was a guy, I was in college many years ago, and this guy was actually from Georgia. I didn't know him, but he happened to be from the not too far from where I live, where I grew up, and he had dropped out of college. He's like, I asked him one time, I said, what is this, Mike? He says, you can't imagine the level of pain. He goes, and it just overwhelms you. You've got to be in a dark room with, a cold compress on your head, and it can last 4 or 5 hours, a couple of days. You don't know when it's going to come. You get these auras. I mean, it's terrible. But again,
it's so bad.
Yeah, they say it's, and I know people you can get migraines in other parts of your body. It's crazy, but and there's really no way to, it's not like you could take an MRI and see a migraine. I think migraines are actually a better argument than sleep apnea.
Yes.
It's still difficult. All right. Bala, good evening from Hut, New York. Maybe you mean Hot, New York. This is one of my clients. I hope I sent you the revised brief today. Hope you got that. And we're closing in on a hearing date soon, so we're looking good on that. Cynthia says, everyone have a safe and happy 4th of July. Same to you, Cynthia. Chloe, how are you doing, Chloe? Hope you're doing well. Kathy Clayton, how are you doing, Kathy? Dimple, we have a regular. I don't know if Dimple comes to your live stream or not, but I never knew a Dimple
Yes.
before. But Dimple is here from Ohio.
First time, right?
Okay,
Yeah.
there you go. All right. Charlene Ferguson, how are you doing? We got Deanna Houston. Hello, Joy and Jonathan. Hello, Deanna. Kathy said,
Deanna.
I'm in the appeal status. Do you suggest a phone interview? Attorney says the phone might be held out of state. When you say appeals, I assume you're not meaning the appeals council. I assume you mean you just got a denial and you filed a reconsideration. Um, I've never done a phone interview or a phone call and recon. Have you? I mean, it's just normally just do it.
No hearings. Yep, we
Yeah.
don't do the hearings there.
Yeah. Recon, I think if you look at the recon form, it says you could choose to do it in writing or a telephone call or whatever. Recon, honestly, it's a waste of time. I mean, statistically, it's like 15, 16%, and usually it's listing level. I had Spencer Bissions on last week, and he's like, they just do it to delay the process, to frustrate people, make them give up. I don't know if I'm quite that cynical, but I wouldn't get overwhelmed with recon because it's more important to get it filed on time and just to say I'm still disabled. And if there's something really significant, yeah, get it in. But I wouldn't worry. Recon is just not that's not where you're gonna see big changes there. Okay.
I think, by the way, I think she might have been asking about ALJ appeal.
Oh, maybe an
Because
ALJ appeal.
Maybe
Okay.
she means a phone hearing, maybe?
Maybe. Let's assume that. Okay. So do you recommend a phone hearing, in-person hearing, video hearing? What's your take?
I'm all about the video hearing.
Yep.
In person, out the door. Phone, I don't prefer that. I think I like the judge to see my wonderful client and how wonderful they are.
Yeah.
And how credible they are, and if they're in pain, because most of them are generally in pain and sitting there for 45 minutes, they might have to get up and stretch or whatever. So I like that. And that wouldn't be evident on a phone. Their voice, their tenor of their voice, I just,
Yeah.
And you might get that on a phone, but it's not with the expressions and everything. So I like the video.
I like the video.
I like it because everyone could stay in their own space.
Yeah. I have a little different take. I give my clients a choice. I'm like, I'm happy to do it. I've got obviously the video set up like we're doing here. I generally recommend phone just because for two reasons. One is the equipment issue. I've had a number of video hearings where people don't have great internet connection and it gets a little choppy, and judges just get really impatient with that. That's number one. Number two is if they're doing it off their phone, which many people are, and they're holding their phone. So imagine you're doing a video hearing and you're doing like this. It's going all, if you're going to do a video hearing, it's better to do it from a laptop, better to have your phone on a stand.
On a stand, yep.
And something like that. The third reason I'm not a huge fan of the video hearings, and again, they're fine. I typically like phone, is, I will send my client kind of some notes about, like, we go through in a pre-hearing call, let's say how long you can sit, how long you can stand, things like that. You can have that in front of you. People get nervous. So, if we just, and like, I'll do a pre-hearing call, and I'll say, okay, let's talk about how long you can stand. Oh, about 2 hours. I'm like, 2 hours? I couldn't stand for 2 hours. I mean, and people overestimate their capacity, or how much can you lift? Oh, about 50 pounds. Really? 50 pounds, a lot of weight, and so we go through it all, and we talk about, okay, a gallon of milk's 8 pounds. Could you hold a gallon of milk in each hand and walk around with it for 3 or 4 hours in a day? Putting it down no. So we come up with what the reasonable answers to these questions are. And again, I'm not putting words in their mouth. I'm just saying I challenge them on it, and then
That's
they
right.
have it in front of them. Yeah, they have it in front of them. And again, if it's a video hearing, they're looking down. It's obvious they're looking at it. A telephone hearing, they're not. The other thing is, I think sometimes people get a little bit nervous with a video too, and I find that judges aren't really always looking at them necessarily. They're looking at their computer.
Mhm.
Again, I do plenty of video hearings. I'm fine with them. The only thing for me is that means I got to put a suit on. I'm still wearing shorts, but I got to put a coat and tie on. Um, but video hearings are fine. But we go through.
The
We talk.
top.
Yeah, the top. Business on top, party in the bottom. But
That's right.
we go through it. And some people want video, and some people don't. It doesn't matter to me. But I do think there's pros and there's cons. And you mentioned the pros.
I definitely agree with you on that. There was one instance, and it was one because I do generally prefer the video, but there was a fellow who he had all cardiac, really seriously severe cardiac, and he wasn't. He might have been 50 at this point, but he was like a Adonis to look at. I'm talking about like in shape. Looks
like me,
perfect.
like me.
Exactly.
Oh, okay. Just want to make just so everybody has an idea what you're talking about. Okay, continue.
And I was like, and this was during COVID when they didn't have the video stuff all together, but we didn't want to wait with his hearing until an in person, because his appearance would do him no favors per se. Particularly, this. I was like, okay, and so we did the hearing by phone. Of course, it was fine. I think also it's important to know it might not matter so much, guys, what Jonathan and I are talking about, like his preference for phone, mine for video, but sometimes it doesn't matter because we have already prepared the case so much. The judge is going to largely be figuring it out from
on the evidence. On the evidence.
Prepare. Yeah, we've done briefs and we've nitpicked it to death and presented that to the judge. So the work is really more there. I mean, the hearing is important so you don't blow it, actually.
I think you do. That's don't you say that you're not being facetious. I completely agree with you. I think that if anything, the medical evidence is about 80 to 85% of whether you win. Your testimony maybe 10 or 15%, and your lawyer's brilliance 5%.
Yeah.
But my point is that your testimony can probably hurt you more than help you. It's got to be consistent. And you're just putting a voice or a face to the name, but you could, I've seen people with decent cases blow it because their testimony didn't make any sense. I remember I had one where the guy, and we had a pre-hearing call, and we talked about all this stuff. And, and one of the questions, how much can you lift? I can't lift even a pound. Like what? During the pre-hearing, we talked about, 5 or 10 pounds, whatever. And the judge is like, you can't lift a pound? No, I can't even lift a pound. Judge, are you sure? He kept saying, he asked me like 3 or 4 times, are you sure? You want to stick with that? Oh, I can't lift even a pound. Well, you're holding your phone. You're holding, that's just not believable. No one's going to believe you can't lift a pound.
Yeah, and it's like, what was he thinking to suddenly say this? And it wasn't in his function report, right?
Right. And how long can you walk? Oh, about, a minute and a half. I mean, it was, he was trying so hard to show how bad off he was. He came across as being completely not credible. And the judge, of course, denied the case. You just have to be, that's why practicing these questions and being challenged by your lawyer a little bit, I find, again, men in particular tend to overestimate their capacity. Some women do, some women, underestimate it. It's just, you've got to really think about what you can do.
Yeah.
Your lawyer will challenge you on that and say, let's look at this evidence. You've got 3 herniated discs. Is it realistic you can lift 20 pounds? I mean, probably not. Maybe you can, but I mean, and also what I tell people too is when you're talking about what you can lift or how long you can walk or sit or stand or whatever you got to do, it's not like a gun's pointed to your head. You can do it one time. This is imagine on a scale of 1 to 10 or 0 to 10, 0 meaning you're bedridden, 10 meaning you can do the tango. You're feeling great. Pick a day that's a 3.5 or 4. Not the worst day, slightly less than average, but you're feeling a little bit. Maybe the weather's not great, but you're feeling you're able to function, but it's not a great day. And secondly, think about in the context of doing an activity 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, month after month. This is not a one-time thing. This is something when I ask you how much you can lift, Occasionally means about 3 hours, 2.5, 3 hours in a day. Frequently means 4 or 5 hours in a day. So think about a day that's a 3.5 or 4, and you're doing it day after day after day, month after month. How much can you lift? If you guns to your head, could you lift 50 pounds? Probably. You'd be in bed for 2 days thereafter. That's not what they want. They're looking at it in terms of a work situation where, if you had a job and the requirement was to lift 20 pounds, could and you had to do it 7 or 8 times during the course of a day, once an hour, twice an hour, could you really do it? And that's what you got to think about. So giving it context, giving it, perspective is important. And that's what we do, is to challenge you on those things so that you're in the right mindset. Right mindset. Okay. All right. Baxter says back pay, they go back to application day or DLI? Neither. They go back to your onset date, theoretically. And this gets a little bit confusing, but just to give you the brief answer, you look at your onset date, the day you say you became disabled. In a Title II disability case, there's a 5-month waiting period, so 5 full months. So if let's say you're disabled on the 14th of the month, you don't count that month. Then you start the next 5 full months. And you can get paid up to 1 year prior to your date of application. And your DLI is, you've got to be found disabled before the DLI, which is your date last insured. So generally speaking, if you say you became disabled 7 years ago, but you filed for disability last year, you don't need, you can try to prove you're disabled 7 years ago. You may have to for DLI purposes, but big picture is it's really about your onset date and your date of application. Again, this is where your attorney can walk through the numbers and look at them and say, you max out your dollars by using this onset date. And there's medical evidence supportive of that. And that's where you're at.
There's one thing to consider, though. If you have like a really old, in your heart, you think you're disabled back 7 years, if you weren't treating for it and it's just kind of a thought in your head, I would say pick a more suitable onset date. But let's say it really was the same. You just didn't even know there was such thing as SSD. I've had people like that.
Yeah, yeah.
I think, and Jonathan, I'm not sure how it all works, but I believe, let's say they find him disabled back to 7 years ago because it was really robust, and then they're definitely not going to pay that far. But I think the fact that the disability is official 7 years ago, all the 0 years of no work,
right, won't hurt.
It will. That will no longer be used in his calculation for the amount of his benefit. So it'll be really important to get those as disabled, even if you can't get paid for them, because those zeros are not going to drag down your disability amount and therefore your retirement
or your retirement payment. Yeah. However, the problem is that, judges don't like to, first of all, it's really hard to get medical evidence from 7, 8, 10 years ago.
Yeah,
it's really hard to do. And I think judges, they're reviewed. And so for them to find somebody disabled 7 or 8 years ago, it's a hard, they don't feel comfortable. Many judges don't feel comfortable doing that. And again, my main thing is, can I get it before the date last insured? That's what I got to prove. So I'm just trying to win, but my experience is the judge is going to say, can we change the onset date 9 times out of 10 to make it easier for them to justify their decision? But you make a good point that if there's a lot of zeros in there, that could drag down the payment, but a win is a win. And I'd rather get a smaller payment but a win as opposed to zero payment and with the wrong date. So you got to be. Some judges will negotiate, some judges won't. It just depends on the judge.
Well, I find too. Do you unilaterally, like if you have? Obviously, if it's a really ridiculous alleged onset date, but otherwise, do you suggest to the judge, hey, we might want to amend our onset date if it's just it gets super strong here, but it's here, but it's not as strong? Or do you discuss it with your client, like we might want to agree to this if the judge suggests it?
Yep.
That's how I kind of do it. I'm like, let's be prepared if he asks.
Yep.
Technical absolute reason.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'll say to my client, look, the likelihood is the judge is going to tell you that he's open to approving you as of your 55th birthday. We don't have to take that. But I'm looking at the evidence and I'm telling you that the evidence to get you back to sedentary, which is where you'd meet the grid rule, it's not really there. There is evidence to limit you to light. And if we go for your 55th birthday, you're before your date less insured, you're going to get a win. Um, and, but I'm not going to suggest it most of the time. Now, again, sometimes I'll say to the client, look, we have a difficult judge, a low approval judge. Let's go in there and be reasonable and say we're prepared to amend to the 55th birthday. You're still getting 2 or 3 years of past due benefits. That's, I think, is a better way to go. But it's ultimately my client's decision. So sometimes, usually they'll say, what do you think? I'll say, this is what I think. But yeah, most of the time I'll say, let the judge bring it up, because I've had situations where I'm looking at it saying, this clearly is the 55th birthday, but the judge is like, okay, I'll grant it as of the 53rd. You don't want to talk yourself out of a win. So, but I always tell my client, be prepared that the judge may do it. And if they do, the judge will say, you want a minute to talk to your client? I'm like, no, we talked about it beforehand. We're prepared to amend. That's what they like. So, judges, especially, we've been doing this for a while. Both of us have been doing this for a while. You start to see the same judges and which ones are reasonable. We also, you can look at the listserv, get a sense of, what the judges are all about. So you just want to, you make their life as easy as possible, and a win is a win, and again, if you have a judge who's, notorious for being, for changing the onset date or not approving good cases, if you can get a win out of them, you're ahead of the game. That's what I think. Okay. Baxter says, I had to fire my lawyer. Do they still get paid? This goes back to what you said. They can. I mean, your attorney, if you fire your lawyer, the lawyer can withdraw and waive fees, or withdraw and not waive fees, and then file a fee petition. And if he files a fee petition, that means that he's going to get paid, if the judge accepts it based on his work. There's a couple of issues there. Number one is, you may have a second lawyer filing a fee petition. You may end up paying more than $9,200 because you got two lawyers on working the case. Number two is, you may have a hard time finding a lawyer to take your case, because quite frankly, if somebody comes to me and I got to file a fee petition, I'm not taking the case.
We hate it. Yeah.
It's terrible. I mean, they just, I had Pete, I can't remember Pete's, I'm drawing a blank on his last name. Friend of mine, he's in Nashville. And he is a disability lawyer. He used to work for Social Security. And we were talking about this one time, and he said, the issue with fee petitions is everything in Social Security, there are metrics to evaluate performance. The adjudicators have to get this amount of work done. The judges have to get a certain number of cases, processed. Fee petitions, there's no metrics at all. There's no advantage to a judge or anybody in Social Security to get these things. Pete Harris is his name. There's no metrics for it. So they don't care. They don't care. They'll sit on these things for years. I got a fee in a case. It's like 5 or 6 years. It just sat there, and eventually I just kind of gave up. I wrote a bunch of letters, and I'm just not getting paid. And all of a sudden, it shows up in my inbox. I get paid. So they're miserable. So I would be really, really careful about it. I think the second thing, if you just reach an impasse with your lawyer, what I would do would be to say, look, we sort of have an impasse on whatever. If the lawyer won't waive fees, try to get him to accept. Okay, would you agree to, if another lawyer takes it, would you agree to accept $2,000 or $1,500 or whatever? That way, you go to your new lawyer, and say, look, the old one will accept $1,500, $2,000. There's $9,000 potentially in play. Would you agree with that? Or the other lawyer will take 15% of the fee or 20%, whatever. Maybe you find a lawyer who says, I could live with that. But, it's always a difficult thing when you fire a lawyer and you bring somebody else in, because the first lawyer may feel wronged, may feel like, okay, you fired me for no reason. It's happened to me. I had a case one time where I had a guy, I did all the work, fires me like right before the hearing, does the hearing himself, wins the case, and I don't get paid. The judge just ignored my fee petition. So
wow. Yeah. See, they need to have something that, they just encourage the very behavior that they have the reason for the fee petition. That's nuts.
It is nuts, but it happens. It happens.
I have 3 that have never been paid.
Yeah.
Super
Yeah.
nice clients too. They're appalled themselves.
Yep.
They're,
Yep.
they're all they're all not happy about it. And now it's been like 5 years, so I'm just kind of they just sit there and I just pretend that
Yeah.
I
Okay.
don't I just chalk it up to whatever you chalk it up to.
Yep.
You know.
Cynthia says hello to you both. Thank you, Cynthia.
Hi,
Uh,
Cynthia.
one of my new clients, Joyce, applying for LT. Do you think it's worth taking a look at my application for submitting? Happy to take a look at it. I mean, realize I'm not a long-term disability lawyer. The issues are somewhat similar in the sense that, it's about work capacity. The big difference is long-term disability. The policy may define disability differently. Many long-term policies talk about own occupation. Um, as opposed to no work at all, for at least for the first couple of years. Many long-term policies also limit benefits for mental health cases. Again, happy to take a look at it. You know, I can the same concepts. You want to focus on vocational stuff, sitting, standing, walking, being very specific. But yeah, I'm happy to take a look at it. But with sort of a not, again, I've done some long term over the years, not my area of expertise, but I can probably tell you if it looks like something is really wrong, as opposed to this is great. But I'm happy to look at it if you'd like me to. Okay, Chloe says, what's the hardest part about proving limitations that don't show up in an MRI or a blood test? So you're almost talking about what they call idiopathic conditions. So you have a person who's got terrible back pain, but the MRI doesn't show anything, or they have rheumatoid arthritis, but there's no rheumatoid factor in their blood. So what do you do when somebody has an idiopathic condition, or it's, maybe CRPS, where, they've got terrible pain, but there's no definitive cause for it? What do you do? How do you approach those cases?
Well, there's a diagnosis one way or another that has to be through acceptable medical protocols, right? Or else they're not going to accept it as an MDI. So before you can even get to the limitations, you have to prove that it exists, right? Mm-hmm. Which they can. I mean, like seronegative RA, right? They have that. They have other longer versions of proving it. Some of those conditions that are proven by excluding everything else it could supposedly otherwise be, right? And I don't know, Jonathan, I'm kind of thinking it's your continued complaints to your doctors that show up in the medical records about this limitation, that the pain, the discomfort, the could be range of motion tests, depending on, depending what the condition is, of course, where the doctor sees it and discusses it with you. You've been complaining regularly. That's showing up in the records. That's kind of like all you got almost.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like the consistency of treating for it for so long. He's prescribing meds for it. He has to fully believe that you have it. He's not allowed to just prescribe because, you ask him to. So you're just trying to go with all that circumstantial evidence that builds the rest of it, I guess. It's not the easiest.
It's not easy. And I think one of the points you made, which I think really resonates with me, is there's got to be a diagnosis. I mean, you can have, an idiopathic condition. Idiopathic basically means it's not linked to anything particular. It's an objective test. But a doctor has to believe it. And again, you have step 2 of the sequential process where we talk about, is there a severe medical impairment? You have to have a doctor to say, yes, I believe this exists. This is going on. And we don't know yet what is causing the symptoms, but they are in fact there. But it is more difficult. Social Security judges in particular like objective evidence. They like to be able to, see a report that says there was an MRI done on April 23rd, 2024, and it showed, a herniated disc at L4-5. That's what they want to see. Or again, if it's migraines, let's say that you've tried, Topomax, and you've tried this one and that one, and nothing has worked. And, you've kept the headache diary, and the doctor believes what you're going through. It. The medications have not been effective, but it's uphill battle if it's idiopathic. Not impossible, but it's an uphill battle. No question about it. All right. And what causes the judge to lose confidence in an applicant's testimony, even when they're telling the truth? This kind of goes to credibility to some degree, but what are some mistakes, Steph, that you've seen clients make in testimony that could really torpedo their case?
Well, she's saying, but they are telling the truth, so he might not believe it. I think it's usually because I'm going to go back to the evidence. If their evidence doesn't, if there's, let's say someone's talking about the severity of their pain, but they're not taking pain medications, and there doesn't seem to be a strong reason why not. Like they're just not because they make me uncomfortable, but there's nothing in the record saying they make me vomit. That one made me vomit. This one put me to bed all day. I had no life. I think you have to really address those things. So it usually seems to be maybe tied to the evidence that doesn't say the same story, even though it could very well be true. Trying to think what else, but that's what first comes to my head.
I mean, I think for me, it's when it kind of gets back to the person who says he couldn't lift a pound. You can't exaggerate. You have to be very, very truthful, and you have to come across. I always tell this to my clients: you want to be reluctant. You don't want to be like you feel like you're entitled to disability. You want to present yourself as a fighter. You hate the idea of fighting for disability. This is demeaning to you, makes you feel worthless. Your family doesn't understand. Let the judge know this is really, really difficult thing for you to do. If you go in there with an attitude of entitlement, like, I know I'm disabled, please pay me, that judges pick up on that and they feel like you've given up. You never want to come across as you've given up. You're willing to try anything the doctor suggests, but as you said, if it's, let's say, a medication that you don't want to try, why? Because you've read up on the side effects, it can cause cancer. You have the risk of addiction. You have to have a reason. And then your testimony needs to be consistent with what the evidence is. And again, this is where your lawyer can help you. If you've got let's say, a badly bulging disc, it's not herniated, but it's badly bulging, and it does cause some indention into the spinal, canal. You may say with activity, my pain level rises to an 8 or 9, even minimal activity, if I turn the wrong way or sneeze. But, I may go 2 or 3 weeks without it being a problem. That's kind of consistent with that objective test. So, your testimony needs to be consistent with what the rest of the record says. Because if you come across as being a complainer or exaggerating, or you've got, I've seen situations where they've gone to 30 different doctors. There's constantly something wrong with them. If it's not, it's just one thing after the other, and half the time the doctors find nothing. Judges pick up on that too. You got it. You just have to really focus on 2 or 3, in my opinion, 2 or 3 medical conditions that are pretty clear. The doctors have identified them. They're consistent with the record. Your complaints are consistent with the record, and you come across as a fighter. That you are not, waiting for someone to pay you. That to me is, that's how you avoid a judge losing confidence in you. Okay. Okay, so we missed Hakasan's point. Okay, well, we will try to. Okay, she couldn't. All right, so Hakasan, the point in the question was completely missed. Well, not the first time I've missed a point. I think, again, you were asking about the evidence in the file and the judge not, putting it in the RFC. And again, my mistake if I didn't understand your question. The question I think you were asking was, you've got a lot of evidence there, but there's no specific addressing of functional limitations. What is the judge's responsibility? And the judge, as we said, will come up with an RFC. Will arrive at it based on what he or she thinks the evidence says, and that's presented to the vocational witness. That may be the basis of the decision. Whether that's appealable or not, is the judge reasonable in the RFC that he came up with? That's a question that some appeals judges would say, that's appealable. Some would say it's not. If it's really out to lunch, then maybe you got an argument. So anyway, we'll try to, if you rephrase it to make it a little easier for us, we'll try our best to answer it. All right, the abbreviations, and I know some of the abbreviations were a little
Yeah.
difficult. That's one of the things which makes Social Security difficult. But DLI, date last insured, that's when you're the last date that you have credits for disability. You've got to be found disabled before that date, then you'll be grandfathered in for disability benefits. Um, you know, onset date, is the date you say you became disabled. Um, I don't know what some of the other abbreviations we came up with, but yeah, there's a lot of abbreviations and
Tons. Yeah.
things
Tons.
like that in this world. Okay. Um, if you could give every disability applicant one strategy to improve their chances of approval, what would it be? Um, Again, it's hard to say just one thing. I mean, I think I'm going to give you a couple of them, and you can tell me what your thoughts are. One is you got to go to the doctor. If you don't go to the doctor, Social Security assumes not going to the doctor means there's nothing wrong with you. So you've got to have ongoing medical treatment. That's number one. I think number two is you've got to avoid that attitude of entitlement. You have to have the attitude you're a fighter. So the judge or adjudicator realizes you're not doing this because you want to, it's because you have no other choice. And the third thing is when you testify, you got to be very, very specific. Get rid of not very much, not too far, not very long, not much at all, just a little. I piddle around. Get rid of that. That doesn't mean anything. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 feet, 40 yards, 8 pounds. And you have to practice that. You got to be very, very specific. I think those are some things that just come to mind that I see. I have to work with my clients to get out of those bad habits. So anything come to mind, or is that the same sort of thing for you?
Definitely the same. I would also say, because there's always that big concern, and people I think have spoke about it here. I know they spoke about it probably today earlier too. The doctor's not articulating, your different functional problems and talking about how it hurts for you to walk, to the mailbox or whatever. Making sure your complaints to your doctor, that you make them consistently, like at every visit. Be that squeaky wheel you maybe never were because you've always been that worker that kind of snuffed it down and didn't complain, pushed through it. You really have to, the more you say it to them, the more likely it'll be to get in the record. And I think you would talked about this before, Jonathan. Sometimes you can do it in writing to your doctor, like through the patient portal messaging. In a natural way. Don't tell him what to put in his records, but, hey, doc, I have an appointment in 4 weeks. This has been going on with me, and I just want to make sure I didn't forget to tell you XYZ. I'm having trouble with this, this, and this. Can we address this and see what kind of solutions we might find out? Maybe different therapies that might help, or a specialist or whatever, and feed it in. And then maybe before every appointment, so then it's going to be in the record, because I don't think they can delete that stuff. And it's going to have to come out in the official record, even though it's probably not going to be, frustratingly so, not going to come out in the portal download if it's, even if it's like my chart. The messages don't come out with the medical records, but you can go and kind of screenshot them separately. But they will come out in the official records that they're supposed to definitely come out in. And one of the judges told me that the HITMERs, they come down in that too when they order them. So
Hitmer
that way that helps you get those complaints in, and now it's kind of an official part of the record. So
and this might be a good time to talk about that a little bit. Is one of the things was the bane of our existence 10 years ago is getting medical records. Now HITMER, which basically stands for Health Information Technology, it's an electronic system that allows us to get medical records from the VA, from many large hospitals, and it can be done immediately, and Social Security will do it. And it's a godsend because it just makes life so much easier. And then portals make life really easier too, with the limitations you described, but at least you can get those records. It used to be with routine, I would have records left open, no more. Because we can get those records. So really, really helpful. All right, Jim says, hello all. Hello, Jim. Okay,
hi,
so
Jim.
I was going to try again. You're approved, but no payment question. If the claimant had an attorney to begin with, why would that attorney not follow up to ascertain what happened? Why wouldn't that be a place to start? Well, again, the question we talked about at the very beginning was somebody calls me and says, I got approved 10 years ago. I haven't seen any money. that wasn't my client. And if it's my client, yeah, I've got an obligation to follow through um, within reasonable limits. But we'll set that aside for a second. But no, if somebody comes to me as a new client and says, potential new client says, I want to hire you to track down what happened to my money. The problem is there's really no specific pathway to do that. It could be a lot of things, and it may be buried in some, in your Social Security file, and it could take a lot of time and effort. And this is not like you're suing an insurance company. This is the government, and trying to get these records out and trying to find out what goes on and getting a live person to tell you can be next to impossible. That's why I think it's better to have a congressional representative assist you with that, because they will get better answers. Now, there are situations where I've got one. I'll give an example, one I'm dealing with right now. My client, we got approved. The decision said you're disabled as of pick a date, November 2023. The payment center screwed up, and they said, the payment letters, the letter said, we found you disabled as of March of 2024, which is the application date. So, in fact, I put this on the listserv. My thought would be to write a letter so I wrote a letter to the person who made that call, which is the wrong decision, and then send a copy to the regional director. But those sort of things happen periodically where they just screw up, and yeah, you got to turn over some leaves. But there comes a point where, you get Social Security is so understaffed that it can be really hard to find somebody, and that may again be a situation where you have to turn to the elected representative. So I keep coming back to that, but that to me is a really good place to start. If you
and it doesn't cost you anything.
Right, that's right.
Which is important.
And
I'm thinking also.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. I was just going to say for Hakasad here, my bet is the guy from 10 years ago did not have an attorney. He won his case for whatever, or he thinks he won his case. Who knows? And there was no attorney to do that follow up, and he didn't successfully do it himself. And he obviously just gave up or whatever he did. But my guess is because attorneys like to get their pay.
Yeah.
I mean, they do. So, I don't know.
Yeah. And you said something at the beginning. There could be any number of reasons. There could be a child support claim against it, which sucked the money out. It could be a criminal issue going on. There's any number of things. There could be I've seen it where there's been an overpayment from a prior Social Security case. Nobody bothered to mention. They'll collect it on that. There's any number of reasons. A tax obligation. There's any number of reasons.
Although you would think that they would be paying it and sending saying, hey, we've offset you 100% to pay this tax obligation. You'll be paid off in 4 years, and then you'll get your monies. But I wonder too, if someone goes to jail for more than 30 days or something, their benefits are gonna be stopped. And that long, there's something different going on now, I think, but that long ago, that person would have to instigate getting them back started again. If they were in there for a few years, they're probably going to have to reapply, do an expedition, because there's got to be proof that it continued. I thought I heard something. This is like a year ago or something, a while back, and I don't really tend to have incarcerated clients. Usually, it's after they're out. But I thought I heard something that they're starting to become arrangements with prison systems where the prison system gives notice like 3 months early that the person is going to be coming out, so the person's benefits do kick in faster if they're able to be kicked. The process can get started because they're going to need their money because they are disabled or whatever. Right. If they'd already won, since they've been halted, and then so it's kind of like going to be more seamless when they get out that their benefits can start up again, or if there's got to be a CDR or something that it'll happen so they can move forward because they might not even know at that point, how do I get back on board? They've been incarcerated and all that.
Yeah. But you're talking about a huge bureaucracy, and things slip through the cracks all the time.
And fragmented. I mean, those are state prisons.
Right.
This complete fragmentation.
And, I'll tell you another reason why benefits might not have been started. I have one right now. Won the case. The judge's decision was he needs a rep payee. Client does not want a rep payee. Stalemate. He refuses to get a rep payee. Money's just sitting there in limbo. Can't get paid.
Wow. I would. Is that a client? That's not a client.
Yeah, it's a client. I hadn't gotten paid. He hadn't gotten paid. Like, what are you doing? Why are you not Just get a
And
rep
why are
payee.
you not getting paid?
Don't know. Don't
I
know.
mean, if he just gets, I mean, I've had people who get a rep payee and then they can get rid of the rep payee if they play their cards right and get a
Yeah.
letter from their doctor. And, so why don't you do it? Start getting your money. And that's so foolish. That just
It's
seems
just,
very
it
foolish
makes
to
no
me.
sense to me. Makes no sense to me. He just
And I don't see why they're
offended.
holding it up for you.
Yeah.
I've seen them hold it up for me until they figured that out.
Yeah.
But almost everyone was able to, it seems like in the last few years, everyone was able to prove they didn't need a rep payee.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
it was
it's a
usually
thankless
about,
job. And then honestly, the guy doesn't need one, I don't think, but the judge decided he does. And we even got a statement from a doctor saying he doesn't, but I don't know. I think he's really, what is it? Cutting off the
cutting
spidey,
his nose to
off the
spite
spidey
his
face. Yeah.
face. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man,
All
it's
right. Does
terrible.
an attorney write a brief at initial, then at recon, then again at the hearing? It kind of, I mean, I don't write full briefs. I mean, if I see a case at initial that should be approved because a person clearly meets a grid rule or a listing, I'll do a kind of abbreviated argument. I'm not going to do a full brief because I don't have a record to really focus on. And realize when we get to a hearing, the record has been worked up, meaning that exhibits are numbered. So like in the F section of the file, you may have exhibit 17F is the neurologist records, and 17F 54 pages, and then 18F may be the orthopedist record. So you can cite to exhibit 18F page 3 is the MRI. Before the hearing level, it's just by date. And there's no way you can really, you could attach it, I guess, but and the adjudicators aren't really that sophisticated that they're going to really read that. I don't think. I think that, you can make reference to it. They'll get it to the medical expert there. And I'm not saying they're not, that's the wrong word, but they don't have time really is more than anything else. So I'll sometimes write a letter, and I've been successful with this, where I spell out my argument, but I'm not going to go into the same exhaustive detail as I would in a pre-hearing brief.
Yeah, you can't do pinpoint citations because there's no record that has pinpoint citation. But yeah, I mean, I think kind of unofficially, we're all always kind of making the arguments, and we submit, here's the MRI showing the cord is severely impinged, and my guy's 55 and he was a construction worker, like grid number so and so. It could be a 5-liner.
Yeah.
It's like it's not the same. But also, I think the adjudicators,
they don't have time. They're not going to read.
Yeah, it's more of a did this happen, as like a checkbox thing, as opposed to a persuasive, can we persuade in the same sense of a judge who's able to read between the lines and uses discretion a lot more, I think.
Plus, I mean, the adjudicators, they gather the medical evidence, they send it to a medical expert, in their works with them, and the medical expert kind of makes some determinations. So unless the medical expert's going to read your brief, which they're not going to do, it's not
no
time. So
I don't even think he'd be allowed to. He's supposed to look at the medical evidence and only the medical evidence. So there's really no audience for a legal brief.
Yep.
It's just, we send in our evidence, say, hey, you can see here's the MRI with the blah, blah, blah. This is very severe. Would you say my guy's 55?
Yep. Yep. All right. Jim says one case 3 years ago. Great. Awesome. Okay. I think must have gotten approved early. Highly recommend. Okay. Well, I'll take a highly recommended anytime. Thank you, Jim.
There you go.
Appreciate it. Okay. This happens. Somebody was approved for SSDI, never received an award letter. Is that normal? It's not normal. There should have been an award letter. First of all, and when you say award letter, there's a decision that has been made. Then there's a payment letter, notice of benefits. So there are two different things. One says you've been approved, either the judge's written decision, ALJ decision, or a decision by an adjudicator. You have been approved. Then there's a notice of award, which basically says, here's the money. Sometimes the here's the money letter doesn't show up. And that can be really frustrating because for two reasons. One is if it's done at the administrative level, initial recon, that is kind of the starting point of our deadline. So if they change the onset date, that's where the 60 days begins to run. So you
Mhm.
kind of need to know that. So yeah, it's not as, I don't see it very often, but it does happen sometimes where you don't get that. And you got to get on the phone and hope to get somebody who can send it to you, but it's frustrating.
I think sometimes it's a bad mail too. Mail just doesn't
Yeah,
arrive.
yeah,
It gets lost in the mail. So I would call and
yeah.
say, I need.
Although, I called yesterday I was trying to get a hold of, this is the case where they used the wrong date on the notice of award. So I called, I think it was Tampa or Orlando, and our current wait time is 50 minutes. Like, I'm not going to wait on hold for 50 minutes. So I ended up faxing a letter, which
Yeah.
I'm going to also mail. But calling is going to be a problem.
Yeah.
Okay, so and Jim, we kind of talked about this before, but he's right. Is make sure you know what's in your file, which kind of is the sort of the same thing we've been sort of kind of hinting at. You got to be your own advocate. You've got to make sure that medical record is as complete as it can be. And doctors don't always put stuff in there. And like Steph said, you can write a letter through the portal. Hey doc, I've been really having a lot of problem with my left hand, and I just I can't grip anything. I can't lift more than 2 or 3 pounds. Make sure, let's talk about this next time I'm in to see you. That's something that would be helpful for your case down the road. It'll get the record, and it may, get the doctor to do something. Or if the doctor doesn't do anything, it may be a signal to you, let's get another doctor, because, they're not responding to you. But yeah, you should know.
One thing too about when you're describing, like when Jonathan was saying, I can barely lift 2 or 3 pounds. If you have trouble knowing the poundage, and I think also it can be helpful just for a judge's interpretation. Think of the thing that you hold that you have trouble with. Like if you're saying, I can't even grab that gallon of milk out of the fridge. That's 8 pounds, give or take.
Mm-hmm.
It might be more illustrative when you're describing what you can't lift, and it might clue you in as to how much it really is, because some people, like, remember when they misinterpret poundage,
Right.
Kind of like people can't estimate very well. Like, I'm pretty bad myself. I just happen to know, like, a gallon of milk is
Yeah, well,
eight
that's
something.
we see that all the time. But yeah,
Yeah.
5 pound bag of sugar, that's something, or a 5 pound
Yeah,
bag of flour.
perfect.
That may be something. But if you say something like, I can't lift a chair, well, that doesn't tell you anything, because what does a chair weigh?
My
So
recliner is like,
yeah, right.
heavy.
So you have to come up with something that, again, a gallon of milk, everybody kind of knows that's an 8 pound thing, or at
Yeah.
least judges know that.
Yeah.
5 pound bag of sugar or whatever. But yeah, you have to come up with something that is everybody would know what it is. All right. Does the ALJ look more closely at the medical records in DDS office 16 with MRI, EMG, abnormal, very favorable CE with doctor limits? I would say a judge looks at the medical records perhaps with a little more of a perspective on it. I've had judges tell me they don't have time to read the whole thing. And that's kind of why you do a brief, to sort of give them a roadmap. I guess adjudicators don't have time either. Some judges, like I've seen records, that are 3,000 and 4,000 pages. Judges aren't going to read 4,000 pages. They're going to look at, kind of the highlights, and that's where a good brief can really make a big difference. But a judge should look at it with a little more knowledge and perspective. And again, I've been doing this for a long, long time, as has Steph, and you look at a record and you kind of know what you're looking for. If it's orthopedic, you're looking for that MRI, you're looking for some, pain management, you're looking for certain things, and you can kind of zip through some of the stuff that's like, you'll see medical records from the family doctor, and they've got like they did a heart monitor, and you see the page after page of this like graph paper with a little squiggly line on it. I don't know what the hell that means. It's just a squiggly line piece of paper. Maybe it means something to somebody, but that judge isn't going to do much with that. But if it's an MRI report, that they would. So I think a judge will look at it more critically. That's the judge's job, really, to do it. But the roadmap from the attorney can make a big difference, in my opinion. And 61 with an MRI, that's helpful. EMG, abnormal, favorable CE, you're in pretty good shape, I think. All right, Diana, recent application, approved, I'm not sure if approved, what you mean, APBD. approved. I'm going to get SSI. I didn't have an attorney because no one would take my case. And then you check it out.
Oh,
Video Stephanie's video. Okay, great. That's, you know what? We love to hear stuff like that because
yeah.
what we can't take every case. Sometimes SSI cases, you know, it's hard to take them because there may be offsets or whatever. Um, but you know, when somebody says, "Hey, you know, I learned enough to do this on my own," that's awesome. That's great. That's kind of
Yeah,
why we do
it
this.
is.
Yeah. So leave
That's
us
great.
both, leave Stephanie a good review, certainly, and you definitely want
That's
to, you
very
know,
kind.
offer. You know, that's you know the thanks we would ask, or she would ask, obviously, in this situation. Um, okay, so Kathy is going to an ALJ hearing. Yeah, you realize every case that you try has been denied twice, and you know ALJs approve a lot of them because you know they're looking at things a little bit differently. And again, a lot of times it comes down to there's no past relevant work where the state agency found there was past relevant work was within the 5-year period of time, or there's, you know, medical evidence that the medical specialist decided was not particularly compelling. The judge is going to say, yeah, actually it is compelling there. So um, judges will tell you they're not bound by anything that went on before. So do not let that bother you. Blah, blah, blah. Like it or not, AI will take over SSDI. If you guys use AI and someone brings you in an AI analysis, don't discard it. Instead, use a check out plans. Okay, I mean, my feeling is AI has a place right now, as I understand it from people who have been working there recently. They are beginning to use more AI. Will AI have a place there? Yes. Is AI ready for prime time now? No. Even the most sophisticated AI is not at this point going to replace a human being, but there is enough data that Social Security could certainly ask AI to, you know, offer probabilities on whether a case should be approved, and that probably will become part of the process. Um, the reason why I don't necessarily want to use what a client has, you know, and I'm no disrespect to the client, but if I get a printout from Chat GPT, where's the prompt? You know, what did the person ask? You know, what evidence was given to that AI tool? You know, what did the prompt tell the AI tool to ignore or to focus on? There's just so many factors that come into play. It's like, hey, just because it's AI doesn't make it right. So I just think that, you know, when I use AI, it's very, very targeted, and I give it very, very specific parameters, and then I proofread
Yeah.
everything. I don't assume it's right. So, you know, I've seen enough. I gave this example a few weeks ago. Had one time, um, I just plugged into AI just a generic question, and I gave some facts, and the AI came back with, well, you know, because there's a 15-year look back for past relevant work, but like, whoa. It's 5 years, not 15 years. So I said
Hmm.
to ChatGPT, by the way, it's 5 years. Oh, you're right. I'm so sorry. You
Yeah,
know,
and that's huge. That's
yeah,
huge.
that's huge. Right. So
I think the end result too is for Hakasad is we have to do all the work we have to do regardless of what the client's chat result was by using it. Not only do we have to add more work to go say, but you got to get me your prompt. What if I need to see all the questions here? I'm making more work, and I still have to do my entire process of how we make sure everything's getting from point A to point B in the end, strongest case possible. So it's really, from my perspective right now, that would just be added work that is not going to change anything. You
yeah,
know what I mean? So there's nothing to be gained by it right now. I think it's great if the client then understands the whole process better. That's awesome. I love it when they learn stuff, and it's one less thing they have to watch our videos for. But
yeah,
I don't know that that would in any way benefit anything except add more work. Like, oh, so now I have to find all the mistakes in that AI.
yeah.
Why would I be adding that when I take the case, I do what I know should be done with SS. I'm not there to, kind of dissect whether that AI did it right
Yeah.
because I have to do my
Yeah.
work.
I mean, just to give you, you know, so you guys understand, and we actually, Steph and I are going to be talking about this because we really have not really discussed it that much. But like when I generate an AI prompt, I'm using Claude, which is this prompt is called the skill. And the way I developed my skill was, you know, I uploaded multiple briefs that I thought were pretty good and multiple redacted decisions. And I work with it. It's a product of months of tweaking. And so when that generates something for me, it's I've got what they call an LLM wiki. If you know what that is, it's like a second brain where I've uploaded all this information. That's a source for my prompt. So it's not like going to Chat GPT and saying, here's 50 pages or 500 pages of medical records. Am I going to win? It's much more in depth at this point. Now, will Social Security come up with something like that? Probably, but AI is a tool, and it's garbage in, garbage out. It's only as good as what you put into it. So I would agree that it's good to help people understand more about their medical condition, the parameters of a Social Security disability argument, but it's not going to replace, at this point, 20, 30 years of experience. Just not. Okay. Okay, this is an interesting question. Initial recon, both were denied at step 2. So basically, step 2 is of the 5-step sequential process is basically saying you don't have a severe impairment. And that's pretty unusual because step 2 is generally thought of as being kind of just sort of a, almost an automatic kind of thing. It's pretty rare they denied at step 2 by saying, basically they're saying there's nothing wrong with you at all.
Or at least you didn't present any evidence or treatment where the records suggested you had a diagnosis that, interrupts some basic, at least to some degree, some basic work.
So that says to me there's some work's got to be done, because if you've got medical evidence and it obviously didn't make it to the file, and at this point they're not seeing anything. I mean, this is a pretty low standard. So step 2 that's not a good place to be. I mean, it's rare that's where it stops. It's like I'll give an example where step 2 would be, let's say that somebody has got a cardiac problem and they've got liver disease or they've got COPD or whatever, and they've got back pain, but there's no MRI, they've never seen an orthopedic, they're not taking any medication for it. They're just saying, I got back pain. And they probably do. We all have back pain at times. But Social Security is going to say there's nothing here other than your statement that you've got back pain. And that's not enough. That's what they call non-severe. But if you have an MRI, you have an X-ray, you have something, that's going to pass step 2. But if they deny it at step 2, it means they don't have anything. So you might want to find out what they've got, because that's really concerning. Return my pain questionnaire, AFR. I know what an AFR. Work history last week. You would make copies. How can I get those? Well, your attorney, once you have an attorney has access to the file, you can get those from the file. You can download them. You may not be able to get them until the hearing's requested, though. I don't know, because I think we just get sections E and F before.
No, they changed that. Like this past year, we get thankfully a little bit more. We definitely can see the work history report and the function report and all that good stuff. Thank goodness. I think AFR is adult function report. She's probably referring to. Yeah.
But it's a good idea to make copies, but if you don't, you can get them. If worst comes to worst, you could theoretically go physically to the Social Security office and get copies of them there, but your attorney should be able to get copies of those electronically.
Yeah. I'm guessing Lucy doesn't have an attorney.
Okay.
I'm just thinking, because she returned her stuff herself, That's, I guess so.
You might have to call.
Yeah, call the SSA.
Yeah, call them and see if you can get through. If you meet the financial terms, is it easier to get it for SSI or the same standard? It's exactly the same standard. You have a medically determinable condition that has lasted or expected to last 12 consecutive months, result in death that prevents you from engaging in substantial gainful activity. Exact same definition. So neither one is easier than the other. It's the exact same.
Yep.
Okay, so we've got paperwork that talks about memory loss. I'm not sure the context, Baxter, but it sounds like, there is evidence of memory loss going back a ways. Now, the question is, where did it get from being an annoyance to being vocationally significant? Um, was it in 2023? Was it in 2024, 25? That could be the real question in your case, because, conditions like memory loss can, or really any degenerative condition, multiple sclerosis or back pain or, lupus or anything, it can reach a certain point where it becomes work preclusive. The question is, where does the evidence line up on that? How soon before, Jeff asks, before my 55th birthday should I apply, or should I wait until one day after? Really, the issue is not the date of application, it's your onset date. So if you applied now, but you say you can't put an onset date in the future. So if you put your onset date last week, let's say, and you're going to be 55 in 2 months, there's something called a non-mechanical application of the grid rules, where if you're really close to that threshold birthday, like 55, you can still be treated under the grid rules as if you're 55 when you're 54 and 10 months. So if that makes that helps at all, that's one thing you can do. But your onset date's what's controlling, not that application. You can apply 6 months later and use an onset date as of your 55th birthday. What I would tell you is, if it's looking like it's a clear grid rule approval or likelihood of approval at 55, I would tell somebody, don't stop working at 54, because you're not going to get paid probably on that. But I think the onset date's really, really the key here.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering, Jeff, you're obviously thinking about the easier rule that'll apply once you're 55, but that only means that it'll only apply to an onset date that's after 55 or during that category change thing. What if you, Jeff, I don't know, maybe your evidence shows that you could only do sedentary work. You could have, if you've been wouldn't you stop working? If it's been 2 years, maybe you would win as a 50 to 54-year-old. So, and now
Yeah, don't give up
go
on
back
right.
more than 17 months. So I wouldn't wait.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that.
Since you don't know,
you can always move it forward down the road, or they may move it forward for you. You never know.
Right.
Jinmi, first time account, changed lawyers and found that the big box were not responsive. And again, I don't ever like to criticize another attorney, because there are good attorneys out there, and there's some attorneys who phone it in, and that's going to be but there's some very good large firm attorneys. So it just depends on the particular one and the process they have. So, okay. Well, great. Thank you very much, Jen. We appreciate the kind words. I think that
Hi, Jen.
we both put these videos out there to help educate people on what's really a very opaque process, and that's why you do it. Is that there's a certain you kind of, I guess we're both kind of educators at heart. You want to let people know more about it. Obviously it generates business, which is a good thing. But sometimes somebody gets an approval on their own, and they leave me a nice review, that's fine too. So we put it out there for a reason. It's because my feeling is, and I'm sure you feel the same way, good karma. You put good stuff out in the universe, it comes back, and that's
true too. Yeah.
Thought is okay. If you're denied an ALJ, can you reapply with a new application? You can. We talked about this earlier. Something's got to have changed, because if it's the exact same medical condition, all you're doing is you're saying, what has changed in the 2 weeks since you were denied? Probably nothing. So you got to wait until, in my opinion, you got to be aware of your date last insured. First, exhaust the appeal. Is there any possibility you can or should appeal? Assuming that's not the case, then you need to come up with something new as to reason why it should be different now. They're not going to, a new judge it's probably going to go to the same judge, but if it goes to a new judge, they're not going to look at it all over again and give you a second bite at the apple. denied twice, filed for hearing, did an MRI this week. Doctor said need surgery. Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, an MRI that leads a doctor to say you need surgery, that suggests a pretty significant condition. You're 62, obviously jump off the top of my head, the grid rule, the light grid rule, because if you need surgery, you're probably not going to be able to do light work. The question here is the onset date, because the MRI is this week. Can you convince a judge that your condition was the same at this level, work preclusive level, a year and a half, 2 years ago? That's, you don't want to, are you okay with getting approved, with an onset date of, June or July of 2026? That's the question. Diana says, she'll leave us. Thank you. Appreciate that very much. Reviews are good. Love them. Why did that close? Okay. That's actually a very interesting question. Rip says, why do ALJs not consider a closed period when denied? They may not think you're disabled at all. A closed period basically means they accepted that you were disabled, but you're no longer disabled. You went back to work or the medical improved. But that's not the same thing as saying you're not disabled at all. They deny you, they're going to say you've never been disabled. Now, you may disagree with them, but that's what they're saying there.
Or you were never disabled for a full 12 months.
Right. That's actually a good point. There's a term element here. So I've had people sometimes reach out to me and they're like, okay, I've been out of work for 11 months. I'm starting work again next week. Can I get disability for that period of time? No, because you have been out for 12 consecutive months. So, I mean, there are some workarounds, but generally speaking, if you have a choice, wait until, 12 consecutive months in a day before you start working again. You have a better shot at getting that closed period if that's what you choose to do. And I think closed period judges like them because it's it doesn't put the trust fund on, indefinite payments, and, they can approve it, and it's not, it's not something they have to worry that somebody's taking advantage of the system. They've gone back to work or their medical is improved.
Right.
Okay. All right. Okay. Great. So looks like Dimple has found you through me. People have found me through you. So that's awesome. Very good.
Dimple rocks.
Okay. Smith versus Kajaks. That's not the right spelling of it, I think. Is a lifesaver. I'm not sure. Tell us what that case. Do you know what that case is? I don't know.
Refresh me.
I don't know.
I don't know that I've even done a report on it yet.
Yeah. Okay. Partially persuasive. Okay. That can be it's like being a little bit pregnant, right? Partially persuasive. Either you are or you're not.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means exactly.
Half glass full.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. Yeah, we're not we both use, AI. I'm just saying is that Chat GPT it's like Google of the old days. People go to Google and they come up with all this stuff, and it's sometimes right, sometimes not right, or sometimes relevant. AI is a great tool. It's a phenomenal tool.
It's a tool.
And lawyers who don't use it are going to be left behind. No question about it. It saves a lot of time and effort. It crunches a lot of stuff. It does some really neat things. But it is a tool. And unless you prompt it correctly, and unless you give it context, it's going to not give you the best information. But it is a very valuable tool, I think, for people to use to better understand the medical, to understand the context of what Social Security is looking for, and makes you a more educated client. But I would not be doing myself a service or my clients a service if I filed an AI-generated brief without a lot of review. And I think if you submit an AI-generated brief, you're in trouble. That's my opinion.
You basically tell it what to write, almost.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah. All right. Ann Miller says, this is disheartening initial and recon for listing level. Grid rules sometimes. There are sometimes when they'll approve cases on functional capacity, but generally not. The ones I'm seeing approved early are really, really severe illnesses. It's not with as much judgment involved. Um, it is. That's just my experience. What do you find?
I would say it's well. I always think of initial and recon as being like a check. Like you all your pieces have to fit into those check
Yeah,
boxes.
yeah.
Square
Magic.
pegs into square holes, and if one's awry, one little thing,
Yeah,
you're getting denied. So
yeah,
they don't have. I don't feel like they have the discretion that a judge has
yep,
to, use kind of common sense.
yeah. Well, and look, I
Common
mean,
sense.
the adjudicators realize perspective on this. Social Security is running out of money. Okay, the trust funds are running out of money. You hear that if they don't do something the next 5 years, the benefits will be cut by 30% or something crazy like that, 28%, something like that. It's not going to happen. I mean, Congress is not going to let that happen.
Right.
They're going to make a fix. But you know when the fix is going to be? If the deadline
Taxes.
is January 1 of 2034, December 29th, 2033 is where the fix is going to be.
That's right. Right.
Right. So it's going to be the very, very last minute. It'll be a lot of hand wringing. I mean, these jokers in Washington, this money, they shouldn't have spent it. This money should have been set aside. It should not have been used for anything. They used it to buy treasury bills, which essentially they're borrowing from themselves, then use that money to fund all their pet programs. I mean, what I'd like to hear is if Social Security gets cut, then their salaries get cut. They shouldn't get any salary. Social Security is a solemn promise, and they've managed to steal it from you. So it's not going to. AARP is not going to stand for it. It's not going to go anywhere. But at the same time, at this point, the state agency and the Social Security Administration are telling their adjudicators, make people, don't give this money away. Make them work for it. Every T's got to be crossed, every I's got to be dotted. If something is missing, deny it. And, that's what they're doing. They're making it really, and they want, Spencer Bishens used to work there, says they do this to make people give up. They get this form letter from Social Security that says, we found that you can do other kind of work, and people get mad at it and they ball it up and they throw it away. They go away. That's what they want. So, I think that, initial and recon, they make it really, really hard to win. Recon, total waste of time. I mean, they've just evaluated.
I love recon, Jonathan.
Yeah?
I love recon.
Why?
Yeah, I do.
Really? How come?
Because I don't know. I find it a great opportunity for, I do.
Okay.
I would say particularly for the over 55s, again, they've got to be
Yes.
taking advice and doing all their stuff, but
Yeah.
I do. And I just, it doesn't mean you're going to get 75% of your recon wins. I'm not talking
Right.
about numbers like that. But yeah, I'd say we can bump 15 is the average. You know what I mean? That's the, like, if the waterfall is still the same, I think it was.
Yeah. 15.
Yeah. So some people do make it, and I think, so maybe there's some people, if they do the hard work of like getting the treatment that they should be, the follow up, maybe it's 50% for them, or whereas then some people it's going to be next to zero. So that's what I mean, that's where you're. So I don't know. And the one thing I like about recon so much is because it gives my clients the opportunity who didn't have a lot of treatment and stuff going into it to
get to the doctor.
Get it. And then so even if they don't win on recon, their ALJ hearing is so much, they have a greater opportunity. So I don't know. I don't have a problem with it. I think it, the old rushing, haste makes waste.
Yeah.
For some people. So I don't know. I just have a totally different way. And I know that my idea is a little bit
foreign. You know what?
it's the minority view. But
yeah, hey, why not? Why not?
Yeah.
We have to submit another adult function. Yeah, I mean, I think that generally speaking, they're going to ask you for the forms all over again most of the time. And that's not a problem because, again, that may give you a chance to explain, like Stephanie said, how things have, really gotten worse for you. So, so you went through quality control. That's got to be really frustrating. That's terrible.
Oh, man. Yeah.
They approved you and then they backed it off with quality control. That sucks. People hate that.
Yeah, and I don't think that's that common. Just appeal that.
Mm-hmm.
I think you have a really good just because the adjudicator thought you were disabled,
Yeah.
you know, and
Some
it,
technical issue got you reversed. Oh,
weird. Yeah,
all
I
right.
think
We got
that's
it.
not that common.
Yeah, we got about 10 minutes, so let's try to zoom through these. Had a seizure while driving an ambulance, crashed. Documented memory loss. Memory loss is not a good timeline. Again, I hate Baxter. I don't really want to give advice. It's very hard to give advice with very limited information. Um, Obviously, if you had a seizure driving an ambulance, that's not a good thing, and certainly would disable. I think it would prevent you from returning to that work. Now, again, 2018 is, you know, well within the before the 5-year look back, so not going to even count there. Memory loss. It's just the question is degree. You talk about everybody agrees you've got memory loss. How bad is it? Is it work preclusive? Would it prevent you from doing a simple entry level unskilled job? That's really the question. So you can have, moderate memory loss and still do a routine, repetitive type of task. Your job is to put ink pens in a box all day long. You don't need to have great memory to do that. You can have memory loss. But at some point, and by the way, they don't count. People may be aware of this. Getting to and from your job doesn't count. So you may say, well, I can't drive anymore. Doesn't matter. They figure you take an Uber. Um, it's when you get there, could you do the job? And somebody with memory loss could do a routine, repetitive type of job, as long as they don't need direct supervision. So it's a matter of degree, I think. Okay. So everybody, all the specialists say 2016. Again, to what degree? What degree? Okay, so Riff says Smith versus Kazaki is a Ninth Circuit case where the ALJ denied a claim without considering a closed period. Apparently, it was remanded because of that. That's kind of a narrow holding. First of all, it's a Ninth Circuit, which means if you're not in California or Arizona, it's not going to really apply to other places. That's number one. Number two is, the fix there would be that the judge, in certain circumstances, has to simply say in the decision, I considered this for a closed period, but decide there was no ongoing disability. It sounds kind of a technical kind of thing. I don't know that this case would be one that would be especially relevant on an ongoing basis. I could be wrong. I don't know. That's
I'm curious. I mean, I'm curious to read it now because
yeah,
it piqued my curiosity. Because if he never finds you disabled to begin with, why would he have to determine whether it's a closed period? That
yeah,
doesn't seem to make
yeah.
sense to me. So I'm
Right.
just curious.
I
Now
kind
I
of
want to
agree.
go read it.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
might, this is for Dimple. I might just take that case and throw it through AI,
hmm
chat GPT, and say, hey, tell me.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like, that's a fun thing to do.
yeah. Or you're right. You could right. That's right. Take that case, upload it to ChatGPT, and say, how could I use this to argue for my disability? Just see what it comes back with.
And I just want to know what the actual
Yeah, yeah.
holding is, but yeah.
Okay. So do you try me when the listings during initial and recon or grid, presumably if listings apply? I mean, honestly, I don't see a lot of cases that are listing level. I just don't. I mean, most people, if they have a listing level case, many times they apply their own and they get approved. Um, so I just don't see that many. I don't know why. They just don't seem to cross my desk. Now the grid, I do see more of those, but realize the issue with the grid is not the issue, but one of the factors in the grid is transferability of skills. And that's a judgment call. So if you look at the grid rules, many of them talk about, you know, does this person have any skills that would readily transfer to skilled work, or education will allow for direct entry into skilled work? That's a judgment call. And a lot of adjudicators aren't going to make that judgment call about whether your skills are transferable, because skills have to be transferable into an RFC. So if the RFC is not particularly restrictive, the skills might be more likely to transfer easily. It's just, I just find that I've talked to several adjudicators, and I know, I've had adjudicators call me out on this. Half the adjudicators I've spoken to don't know what the grid rules are. I mean, just telling you my experience. The other half do, and they'll use them. But usually when they use them, it's to change the onset date. If I had to say what they use them for. So, when I see a case at initial or recon and we're following an application, I just try to make the best possible argument. I'm assuming functional capacity. If it's a grid argument, I'll make the grid argument in the application. If it's a listing, I'd make that, but it's very few are. That's been my experience. Okay, we got time for just a couple more here. In the reconsideration phase, should I send all my records Georgia DDS for my doctor or let them get it from my doctors? Please let me know. This is a question that I actually posed to an adjudicator who came on the live stream. Her take was, let us get them. Then Elise Enton, who's a former staff attorney, said, absolutely not. You send them in. What do you think?
There's some risks I have found by sending them in without having good oversight over it. I've had clients who sent their records into the adjudicator, let's say, but they're partial, like Dr. Jones, the ones they happen to have up until like 6 months ago, and now the adjudicator never goes and orders the rest because they're like, oh, they're in the file. I don't have to order that one. Thank goodness. One less thing to do. And now you don't have the whole thing and you don't know that. So now the rest of you're still seeing Dr. Jones and those records are not getting in, and they'll get in on recon when you get denied. And
right. Yeah, the adjudicator said the reason she wanted to get them herself was they would be more complete, number one. And the other thing is, I'm just going to tell you what she said was they're concerned about people scrubbing the record and taking stuff that's harmful out. And so they say when we get it from the client, maybe from the attorney as well, although I would think the attorney would be less of a risk.
It's a good point.
Yeah, that they just assume they've got to double check it all to make sure it's accurate, and there's double work for them. But, on the other hand, there's enough situations where you see denial notices. We were not able to get records from your orthopedic surgeon. So I've come down with submit them. Just send them in. I think it's better to send them in myself.
I think, we do too. Like, for instance, let's say, and I understand they have to confirm, well, I don't know how much they're going to do it, but if they say, well, I got to check that MRI was not, think about it. With people can, it used to be called Photoshop, but they could change words in an MRI, like on a report. They could completely, it would be fraudulent. I mean, welcome to prison, but I wouldn't put it past someone who doesn't think that far ahead to not do it. That, is unethical. But what I do is, if it's a flat out an MRI or something, I always send that stuff in.
Yeah.
If it's something else and it's partials, kind of like I kind of keep going in to see if they've gotten them yet, and see what they are. And if it's partial, I make it clear in a note on the top, like, this is not all of Dr. Jones' records. Please be sure to order them. But I want them to have a heads up, because this could be an award. If when you see this, if this is true, think about it. It could be, an award. So I kind of want them to know that, see it so that they.
No, what we do is we're constantly calling or email or texting, or not texting, but faxing adjudicators, get these records. They're relevant. Get these records. So let them do the work, but we tell them what to do. So, all right, so we're going to end on this one here where I'm just going to, I'll let it sit where it says, great show, but I like Stephanie's show in the daytime with the bright light and the birds talking. So I think what Cash is saying, I need to get a bird or something.
I got 2 spares.
Yeah, I'm gonna have Sadie come in, my dog, my 75-pound golden doodle, and she just will sit there at my feet. But we'll leave it there. But anyway, Steph, as always, it was great to have you. I appreciate your insight. I'm sure everybody else does as well. Please, check out Steph's live stream on Wednesdays at 1 p.m.
Wednesdays, 1 p.m.
Wednesdays, 1 p.m. And I hope everybody has a great 4th. Steph, hope you have a great 4th. Safe, stay away from the fireworks. And we've got a parade here. And I'm in a small city, right? It's just outside of Atlanta called Dunwoody, Georgia. And they have a parade every year. And
nice.
So my granddaughter, who's a little bit over 2.5, going to the parade. She's very excited about that. And grandson is only like 3 months, but he doesn't care. But we're going to
Yeah.
take her. She's going to sleep over. We're going to the parade, and that'll be kind of fun. And yeah, so 4th of July is always, kind of a positive time. And again, I think somebody said
Yeah.
early on, we live in a great country, and yes, there are problems, and there's a lot of political back and forth. But at the end of the day, we have we're safe for the most part. We have 2 oceans protecting us. We have Mexico and Canada above and below. They're not going to invade anytime soon. We have unbelievable. We have access to food. We have beautiful, wonderful lifestyle. It's a pretty good place to live.
Yeah.
You get fixated on the problems, but every once in a while, it's not a bad idea to say, "Hey, this is really pretty nice." So,
Yeah. We got some rights. Yep. We don't have to. We have some rights that you're not going to find in other places.
Complaining about the government and complaining about Social Security. Try that in Tehran and see how far it gets you. Try that in Russia. See how far it gets you.
How about China? Yeah.
Yeah, China is not going to go very far. So the fact that we can complain is a pretty important thing there. So anyway, end it now. Have a great week, everybody. We'll see you all next time.
Bye, everyone. Good to see you.